don't cut the corner. It takes the same amount of time to do it right as to do it badly. So just do it right.
I like that.
I signed the restaurant March 2020, and then COVID comes.
Literally the same month.
Yeah. And then she said, how about come and do a week on my boat next week in the south of France?
So $7,000 a week and everything is paid, right?
Yeah, $7,000 a week, 21K in 3 weeks. I was like, this is kind of good.
Thomas Straker is a celebrity chef, successful restaurateur, best-selling author, and social media star whose viral recipe videos, particularly his butter series, gained him a following of more than 5 million followers across platforms. His most viewed clip is a recipe for burnt butter, which has racked up millions of views on TikTok. His debut cookbook, Food You Want to Eat, was an instant Sunday Times bestseller. Tom now runs the acclaimed London restaurant Straker's and has launched All Things Butter, a line of flavored butters available in supermarkets across the UK.
You knew where you wanted to be, what you wanted to achieve. You just didn't know how to get there.
I was the private chef in the house cooking for a family of 5. That's when I made my first cooking video. I had 900 followers when I left to go out, and when I came back I had 30,000 followers.
Which video made you viral? You end up achieving your dream, which was opening a restaurant, not following a specific roadmap or strategy.
Yeah, I've got the restaurant, built up a good following, the restaurant's fully booked. Then it's about discipline. But I did this butter series online, billions of views between Instagram and TikTok, and it was going completely bananas. So he said, okay, Tom, I will set up the business and run it. You just don't get cancelled.
You were criticized by the media. So
But
you went from 500,000 to how much?
Zero.
To zero.
Zero. I did not do a deal for a year. How do you build a restaurant that lasts for over 30 years?
I have
Well,
two
I
answers for that.
Yeah, I'm flipping the interview.
The first one, Tom, who are you and what is it that you do?
My name's Thomas Straker, or Tom Straker, whatever you want to call me. I'm a chef, an entrepreneur, and also create a bit of social content. I own a couple of restaurants. I own a butter business, which came from socials. So I've managed to create I never know the acronyms that all my business partners use, but they're CPMG or consumer fast moving consumer goods business. They're FMCG businesses. So I've created a butter business. I'm working on another business, which is olive oil. We have a cookware business. So everything based around food. So I'm fully immersed in the food industry.
Aside from professional accolades and descriptions of yourself, how would you describe yourself personally if you were to describe yourself with 3 adjectives?
I'm energetic, I'm passionate, and I'm loyal.
Interesting. Walk me through your childhood. Where did you live and when did you fall in love with food?
So I grew up in Herefordshire, which is that just on the border of Wales. Rural, very amazing rural country. We were in the southwest of Hereford, near a town called Hay-on-Wye. So that's Hay-on-Wye, famous book festival down there, and right on the Brecon Beacon. So lovely mountains, lovely names like the Cat's Back and Hay Bluff and Penny Fan and all that. So I was immersed in like that. That was my upbringing, immersed in countryside. And I suppose my dad was in the army. That's why we lived down there. And then my mum was at home looking after us kids. I've got 2 sisters, a twin also, and an older sister. So spent life outside. It was idyllic. Mum was very green-fingered or green-thumbed. I can't remember the expression for being good at gardening, but she was incredible at gardening. Always growing, tomatoes in the summer, courgettes and leeks and purple sprouting broccoli and stuff like that. So I suppose vicariously through that, I sort of gained a passion for food. And also my father on the other side, terrible cook, but gave me the passion of hunting and fishing and, you know, catching and cooking what I, you know, man stuff, you know, like shooting a pigeon and then plucking it and grilling it. He would burn it. Mum cooked it nicely, you know. But that, you know, that kind of thing, primal thing of going out and catching or shooting what you want to eat, which is something which sits really deeply within me now today, and something that I have been trying to sort of educate people on across one of my platforms on YouTube. We do a series called Game Eater, where it's going to I've done 12 episodes last year where we went and shot you know, for instance, a roe deer, and then I cooked it in the field. It was like this whole thing about wild,
the best of mom and the best of dad.
yeah, so it's blended that together, and here I am, you know. This is so I really, you know, I sort of thought about going into the army because I was very, you know, it's highly energetic, loved being outside, loved being fit, running, you know, shooting. I loved the whole thing. I loved the pressure you could put on yourself being, you know, whether it's a long distance race or something like that, or walking up a hill, you could really challenge yourself mentally. But then I failed actually getting into Sandhurst, which on my main board, but because I did it when I was 18, they said I was too immature, which probably back then I was, and maybe I still am now. But I then
so you felt to
get into
school.
Sandhurst, which was the officer training school.
But that's interesting. So dad is in the army, mom is into food, yet the first thing you want to try is the army.
Yeah, I never really thought about doing food as a career. I didn't have a chef. I didn't come from a family of chefs or hospitality industry professionals. At one point, my mum did have a little flutter on a pub. She bought a pub with a friend of hers, you know, in the country, you know, the countryside dream of owning a pub. And then the dream didn't last that long, but she ended up falling out with her friend and working too much. And but that was you know, I did have a little taste of that. I quite enjoyed the vibe of the pub life. But yeah, I so failed the main board for Sandhurst, and I said I didn't want to start trying to make myself better to do that, and that was to gain entry. I didn't want to try and address the issues because I was like, that's who I am.
What were the issues?
That I was too immature, and that maybe I wasn't well versed enough on current affairs. I was 18.
I think by definition you should be immature.
Yeah,
18,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, 100%. So I was like, right, I'm going to go and do something. I'm going to go and put my mind. I'm going to go and do this cooking course because it was something else that I enjoyed doing.
So you fail at getting into military school, and then you enroll yourself in a cooking course.
Yeah, a cooking course, exactly. And then
just to try it out, or because you actually believed that you wanted to make a career out of it?
I think initially back when I had left school, I enjoyed sport. I liked dossing around. I liked doing sport, hanging out with my friends, going to the pub, you know, doing all that sort of stuff, you know, music festivals, whatever.
A lot.
I wasn't like driven for, I wasn't in the mode for career path, you know, I'd just left school. So I was like, I'm going to go and do this cooking course. And I'd sort of lined up a few different things that I wanted to do, like go and do a ski season and cook so I could, you know, have fun with my job, and then maybe go and work on a yacht and do that in the summer. And I was sort of thinking about how can I make my job as fun as possible.
So priority number one was having fun. Priority number two was making some money on the side.
Yeah, work to live. And when I left the cooking school, it was only a 3-month course. Very famous course, actually. It's called Ballymaloo, owned by lady called Darina Allen. She's built an absolute beast of a school down there with, you know, a greenhouse that's 1 acre big, and they've got, you know, they do all everything's all organic, free range chickens and cows that you can milk there, and they have a hotel, and they have cooking schools, lovely teachers like Rory O'Connell. Rachel Allen. So they've got this whole family running it. And they're all chefs. There's lots of people.
Do you think you would have been able to become a successful chef without attending culinary school?
Yeah, I think yes, you could have done. Yeah, it was only it was 3 months. It's a small chapter in my career, which is in my journey so far, which has been 16 years. So it's a small journey, but something that has been, they do instill some good ideas and discipline and agendas that you're free to think, but the real work starts when you enter a kitchen. That's when I went to do 2 weeks work experience at the Dorchester, and I was like thinking about this ski season and everything I was going to do out there, and how fun it was going to be, and there's going to be lots of drinking and women and all this sort of stuff. And I was thinking about skiing, and I did 2 weeks, and I was like, right.
You stayed at the Dorchester only for 2 weeks.
No, I was going for 2 weeks work experience just to see how it was like, and they offered me a job, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna take the job, and I'm gonna stay here, and I stayed for 3.5 years.
Oh, why?
And that because it was a great place to learn. There was a team of 100 chefs in one building. I loved the dynamic of the kitchen, the sort of camaraderie, the energy, the banter between people. There was, but also the discipline, the opportunities to learn. There was a 3 Michelin star restaurant, there was a Chinese restaurant, there was a bakery in-house.
And you were exposed to all of those?
You could, by way of speaking to the executive chef, you could work your way into any of the places and do. Obviously, you worked for a restaurant. I worked initially in the Promenade, which was like the restaurant when you go in. It's the more casual restaurant when you walk in the front of the
all day dining.
Yeah, all day dining. So it's like that's where I started. And I wanted to get out of there pretty quickly, and then I ended up in the Grill, where it's like much more modern British, very good ex-Michelin star chef in there, and then working around that. That was like the first experience of a really good kitchen that I worked in, and all the team from that place, from the Grill, have gone on and done fantastically well. That was the first experience where I worked in a team where it's been, we thought we were doing something pretty exceptional. I felt really proud to be working in that team. Then subsequently, one of the chefs is now head chef of a 2 Michelin star restaurant in East London called De Terra. He's called Mark. And then Matthew Ryle, who runs Maison Francois, he was working in the team. Freddie Money, he's got a Michelin star out in Atlanta. Myself, a chap called Andrew Tompkinson's got several cafes and restaurants around.
So the Dorchester,
so it was like it really honed me into that hospitality mode, and I just.
For those that don't know, the Dorchester is a 5-star luxury hotel in the center of London. So the Dorchester for you was the real culinary school.
That was my apprenticeship.
What's the greatest lesson you've learned in those 3 years?
I think it was like it takes us same amount of time to do a shit job as it does to do a good job, and so just do it right.
I like that.
And don't cut the corner. Just take, it takes the same amount of time to do it right as to do it badly. So you got to and then it's also a respect thing, because in kitchens someone's always coming in to work after you, so you got to, so maybe at the beginning I was a little bit lazy, having gone through school, coasted a bit. And then you realize that you realize quickly, like you leave it not perfect for the next guy, then you're leaving them, they start from behind. So it's always about, you got to turn up to work on time. You got to be
teamwork.
Yeah, it's teamwork. It's the team. And I deal with it on a daily basis in my businesses now. It's if people turn up late, I sit them down. It's the respect thing. It's the respect for your colleagues, your the people you're working with. Like, yes, you may have issues in your personal life, but you create issues for other people in their lives if you don't turn up to work, or if you don't communicate, or if you don't, if you don't give people the right amount of time to change something in their day to manage the business correctly.
So you spent 3 years at the Dorchester. You learned tremendously. And then what do you do?
I then went to work for Heston Blumenthal at dinner. Didn't stay there a huge amount of time, just because I'd been in a big hotel, going to another big hotel, but 2 Michelin star restaurant at the time. I felt like I was like a cog in a big machine, and I wanted to get out of that. However, the small amount of time I stayed there, I learned a huge amount as well. Discipline, great recipes.
Did you learn discipline?
Yeah. I'd learned discipline in the kitchen environment. Still incredibly ill-disciplined in my personal life, but always trying to work on that. Just the consistency element of being at the top. At the time, dinner was 5th best restaurant in the world, apparently.
Wow.
According to the San Pellegrino Restaurant Awards. That was back in 2012 or 13, I can't remember.
At some point you became a private chef.
Yeah, that was further down the line. This is where my career took a slightly different path to... Well, I don't know what is normal in hospitality, because all I know is hospitality is... I think there's many different routes you can take for yourself to create the person you want to be in your cooking journey or hospitality journey. I then went to do my friend Ollie Templeton, who owns Carousel, which is a place where they invite guest chefs in on a weekly basis. They'll cook their menu, whether it's from Mexico or New York or Hong Kong or whatever. But before he was doing Carousel, he used to do these supper clubs where they would get 2 chefs together and you'd cook against each other. So I did. It was at a place called Tom's Deli on Westbourne Grove, which was owned by a chap called Tom Conran, and they called it Rumble at the Deli. There was 2 chefs going head to head in like a boxing theme event. So you do one, I'd do one course, he'd do one course. Anyway, so Tom's Deli was owned by Tom Conran. Tom Conran was in for dinner, and he really liked the food I was doing. So he was like, we set up a meeting at the Cow, which is now my favorite pub and the only one I drink in. But the first reason to go to the Cow was
to
the
only one you're drinking.
The first reason I went to the Cow was actually for a business meeting. And Tom said to me, we've got this opportunity at the deli, Tom's Deli, where I've got another year left on the lease, but the business is closed. Shall we do a pop-up? So I ended up going in there and doing a pop-up for a year with Tom. But I was suddenly in a position where, after only 4 years of being in the industry, that I was having to, hire my own chefs, set up the supplier accounts, manage food and stock takes, and doing all. I learned that on the side, doing all. I mean, we probably ran it incredibly badly, but it was it was a big wake up call from very early on in my career, which is why I think at this point now, I sort of in at the deep end. So I'd done my time, and then in at the deep end, and haven't really looked back from there. I then went to work for a chap called Juan Santa Cruz and opened Casa Cruz and Isabel with him. Two serious restaurants, proper money behind it. The deli was sort of like, back of, a bit of cash on the side. It was very much done on a shoestring, whereas Casa Cruz was done on full budget. Isabel, even bigger budget. And then after leaving working for Juan, that was another 3 years of my career. I'd opened restaurants, I'd learnt the structure and put the real discipline in the team and in myself. And learnt a lot creatively from someone like Juan, who was very good at design and customer facing experiences. You know, you go into the restaurant, beautiful, always, you know, good silver, nice plates, you know, comfy chairs, tables at the right height, everything, you know, that was something I hadn't seen before. So always in these new experiences, I'm taking on new bits of information and growing my brain and my own style in this time. So when I left there, I was like, I'm ready to open my own place. I've got a vibe in mind.
How old were you?
I was 27, 2017, or around September I left.
Before opening your first restaurant at Casa Cruz, what was your role? Were you a head chef?
I was the head chef at Casa Cruz, and
Okay.
then I was exec chef of Casa Cruz and Isabel.
And Isabel, okay.
Yeah. But okay, so I left Casa Cruz. I said to myself, I'll take a few months. I'm just gonna like check my creativity, make sure I'm not like jumping straight out of a job into like forming my own place. But I still wanted to work, so by chance I went to eat lunch at Heston Street, and I was like, really good. It's a chef called Phil Howard. He had 2 Michelin stars at the Square. I'd read his books front to back. You know, the covers are all, you know, all the pages are, you know, well worn, and loved the books, loved cooking from them. And I met Phil on the way out of lunch, and I was like, that was insane. Like, thank you so much. I'm a chef, and blah, 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 you know. And he was like, oh, we're actually looking for someone to come in the kitchen for, you know, help us out over this busy period from November to, you know, January. And I ended up staying there, going to work just off the back of lunch. And I stayed there for 6 months. It was great because I saw his food.
As what role?
I just went in as a sous chef. So I was just like, I wasn't fussed about going in.
Interesting. So you took 2 steps down from executive chef to sous chef.
Yeah. And I wanted to go and work, and, you know, I just wanted to cook again and not be fussed by doing rotas and ordering and everything like that. I just wanted to cook and see the food and enjoy being a chef again. And then my wife got pregnant. This was 2000, and I was like, fuck, I cannot keep earning. I can't keep earning 30 grand a year. You know, I need to go and...
As a sous chef, you were earning 30 grand a year.
It was like 30 or 35 or something.
Can I ask you, what were you earning as an exec chef for Casa Cruz and Isabel?
Oh, I think it was like 65 or something. Nothing big. No, that was 2000.
How can you live in London with that salary?
Yeah. But
in central London?
Yeah. No, it's difficult that time. You know, I hadn't... Until this point in my career...
Especially
you know,
because the level of responsibilities for an executive chef of 2 restaurants like Casa Cruz and Isabel is not irrelevant.
No. Is it... Well, okay, so once you... still at this point now, we're in we're late 2018, and I've been working in London for 10 years, and I haven't saved a penny. You know, I haven't not saved a penny in my whole career. I've been living paycheck to paycheck. Yeah, so this 10 years down the line, and I was like, right, okay, Tom, time to get moving. So I was start looking for a restaurant. I left working for Phil at Heston Street.
Were you aware before you started your own restaurant? So you have these multiple different experiences, sous chef, executive chef, and you were just not content with how much money you were making, but were you aware of what were the margins of the restaurants? And then that drew you to then open a restaurant?
Yeah, when I was head chef of Casa Cruz, we'd look through, you know, we'd have a weekly weekly go through the sales, P&L, you know, he was in charge of the GP. I was in charge of the GP. I was aware of...
GP is the gross profit for those ones that don't know.
I was in charge of the, you know, all food costs and sales.
So the restaurants were making money, and that compelled you?
Yeah. No, what compelled me was I knew that I wanted to open... I knew I could make money out of the restaurant if I ran it properly. I knew that Casa Cruz was making good money.
What is properly?
Ran it properly.
Mm-hmm. What is that?
You know, good staff costs, good food costs, like happy team, great customer experience, somewhere you want to go and enjoy to eat and have, you know, that for me, that's properly. If I want to go and eat in the restaurant and have fun, I go out to eat for fun. I don't go out to eat for... I don't often go out to eat for business, really. I'll go out to eat with friends and have a great time and, you know, drink and eat, and that's for me is the purpose of a restaurant. So for me to run it properly was to be able to entertain, be able to look after a team, be able to work with other creative minds.
So then in 2017, 18, you open your first restaurant?
No, it's 2018. I start looking for the restaurant. This becomes a long journey now. Start looking for the restaurant. You know, I didn't have a clue about property or, you know, raising money or doing my own accounts or anything like that, because, you know, I was always on PAYE. And so I start learning. I go to my father-in-law, who was a businessman at the time, or had been in business. He helped me, put me in touch with his accountant. We start looking at setting up the company and doing various things together. So it's like really learning from the ground up. I was obsessed with this site in Queen's Park, a dodgy landlord, this lady who was just completely batshit crazy, and she led us down various rabbit holes. Anyway, during this time, I'm like, fuck, I need to keep earning money. And I'm still trying to learn the business orientation of how to get a site and open a restaurant. And I ended up getting a call from someone who used to come as a guest to Casa Cruz saying, my friend is moving to London. Can you help her find a chef in the house? And I said, yeah, I can help her find a chef. And at this time, I did not want to be a private chef. I thought, having been a chef, I was like, being a private chef, I don't want to do it. I didn't want to go and work in someone's house. So anyway, I go into her house, which is actually just up the road here on, you know, that big street, Kensington Palace Gardens. So I go in, you know, very wealthy family, and she says, do you want to be my chef? I said, no, I don't, but I'll find you a chef. And I did actually find her 3 chefs in the past 5 years. And then she said, do you want to fancy coming? Okay, you're not going to be my chef, but how about come and do a week on my boat next week in the south of France? I was like, that sounds kind of cool. I'm going to go and do that. And it was only until now that I hadn't saved any money in my life. And then I'd go and work on the boat. And, you know, chefs get paid really well on boats.
Can I ask you how much? Ballpark figure.
I think, I think it was like, you know, $1,000 a day or something like that.
So $7,000 a week and everything is paid, right?
Yeah, $7,000 a week. And, you know, you're just working on the boat. So, okay, so $1,000 a day. And then I ended up staying there for 3 weeks. So, I made 21K in 3 weeks. So I was like, fuck, this is kind of good.
I was in the wrong business before.
So anyway, I go back and I keep going back over the next 2 years whilst I was learning stuff about restaurants. So I actually start saving money. So I do, you know, maybe I did 8 weeks 1 year in the run up to it. So I made a bit of cash, and then eventually it gets to 2020, and I've still haven't signed the restaurant. March 2020, I'm literally got this lease down to sign, and then COVID comes.
Literally the same month.
Yeah, same month. And then I get a call from the family saying, do you want to come and watch COVID blow over in St. Bart's on the boat? I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I got...
Can I ask you, sorry?
So I got...
At that point, were you in a relationship?
Yeah, I was married.
You were married?
I had a 2-year-old.
And how did you juggle having a child, a wife, and being able just to go to...
Well, you know, I'd go like two, whenever it was before, it was like 2 weeks or 1 week or 3 weeks or nothing serious. So anyway, I was like, right, COVID, I'm going St. Bart's. So anyway, they sent me the private jet. Just get on the flight.
And you go by yourself on a private jet to St. Bart's?
Yeah, I've gone. And we never made it to St. Bart's. We got to New York, and we end up staying in their house in New York. And I didn't go home for 4 months.
And you stayed with them for 4 months?
I stayed with them for 4 months. I was the private chef in the house, cooking for a family of 5. And at this point, I was like, right, okay, cooking for a family of 5, gonna have to make this kind of interesting to stay here. I didn't know no one knew how long it was going to go on for.
Did they keep paying you $1,000 a day for those 5 months?
Yeah, we did. I'd made a bit of money when I was away in COVID. so that was good. So stay for 4 months. And the big thing I did was not just become lazy and just cook bare minimum. And so I reckoned I could make 3 meals for a family of 5 in the first 4 hours of my day. Okay, 8 till 12. I could cook and prep breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I'd do everything.
Can you tell me what were the options?
Oh, I was going all out. I'd make sourdough, 2 loaves of sourdough every day. I'd then do, whatever they wanted for breakfast. I'd cut fruit plates and do all that rubbish. And then lunch would be always like a starter, main, pudding every day for lunch and dinner. And
Simple
then,
cooking?
Saturday, I always cook simply. I don't know if you've ever eaten in my restaurant. It's all like stripped back, like a whole Dover sole with courgette fritti and a lemon mayonnaise or something for lunch. Dinner might be, a grilled lamb with, a burnt aubergine and tabbouleh or something. You go and like make different, you sort of lean into different parts of, worldwide cooking. They don't want to eat the same thing every day, but I'd normally mainly tap into Italian. Every Saturday we'd have pizzas. So, it'd be like 16 weeks on. We've done 16 Saturdays of pizzas. So we started measuring the time by how many pizzas we've had.
And then you finish your time with them?
But I could do the work in 4 hours because I was like diligent, fast. I got it done. And that meant I had the afternoon to myself. So, at the beginning, it was like, I'd sit and watch fucking Netflix or something. And go for a run. But then I was like, right, I need to make this time pay. I need to make it, I need to make this time work for me better. So I started that's when I made my first cooking video.
On TikTok?
On Instagram.
Yeah,
so I did. So I started doing cooking videos because I was chatting to my friends and they were wanting to cook at home. They're like, can you make recipes? And one of my friends in LA, I was like, yeah, I'm going to make a recipe. I'll make a recipe for you. And so I made this thing and he started cooking and he said, love it. So I started doing these videos more and more. And then I was speaking to friends. I had 900 followers when I left to go out there. And when I came back, I had 30,000 followers on Instagram.
Which video was the video that made you viral?
I don't know. Nothing was like mega viral at the time. But my friend, Ben Liebus, who owns Mob Kitchen, Mob now, helped, they had, 250,000 followers, I think, or something like that. Something like that. And he would reshare my videos, and we did like a live collaboration once. So that kind of helped boost, awareness from an early stage. And we sort of worked together then for maybe a year or so, across. He would help promote my videos. I'd do stuff for them. And then coming back to London after 4 months, I carried on the videos. And it's something that's really it's had a huge, every version, every different section of the business, of my learning in business has come from, putting myself out there. And that was one of the big things, is putting yourself out there on socials, like, readily, like putting yourself, you can do anything. Anyone can say anything about what you've done creatively.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it became a huge, now if I'm looking back on it, I'm so glad I did that, because it's turned my career around. It's not the only thing that's turned it into what it is now, but it's one of the many things that I've added to my.
I mean, you now have almost 2 million followers on Instagram. I think it's 1.7.
Yeah, I've got 2.6
Okay,
million or something on Instagram, another 2.5 on TikTok, 500,000 on YouTube. So it's like it's a big.
To what do you attribute that growth, if you were to summarize it?
I think it's the fact that I cook good food, I have a personality.
A lot of people cook well, Tom,
I understand how I've trained a lot of chefs in my life. I'm a chef, that is it. And I know how to tell you, whether it's through in person or in a video, how to do something properly. So I feel like people, and I think this has come from what people's opinions are of what I've been doing, but I managed to break down something simply and make it very easily to understand, even if it's in a short video format, that the skill sector of how to do it. And I think, and then obviously there's editing style, which I don't do.
So you make videos that are simple to understand by audiences that are not chefs,
Yeah.
right? Something that is digestible for the general public.
Exactly, yeah.
So you explode online and then you open your first restaurant?
Yeah, I think I was still looking. When I came back, I still went straight back into looking for a restaurant, because that was the ultimate. That was my goal, and I've been looking now for 3 years, or 2.5 years. So I get back, almost immediately find the site on Goulburn Road, which is where Straker's is now. Signed the lease. We bought the lease off another restaurant. Small site, 1,000 square foot. I wanted to use. I didn't want to put loads of money into it. I wanted to build something that I could prove concept and make sure that, I would keep various things in there from the last place, because I wanted, like, the extract, which has turned out to be a disaster because we had a fire 2 months ago. But anyway, we put in. I raised 350K from investors, and we were off to the races. We opened in November the 1st, 2022. So if you think back, I started looking in April 2018. So we're now quite 4 years, 4 and a bit years down the line. So that. But in those 4 and a bit years, I learned, I grew, I worked. I never stopped working, and that was the main.
That was also a good year to open, because right post COVID, people were going out and about, spending, living the moment.
Yeah, it was the 2 years post COVID. Yeah, it was a year post COVID. But the biggest thing I did was never stop. I never stopped. I worked every opportunity. I took I went for lunch. I took a job. I finished working. I took a private job, and then I carried on. I was working for a private job. Didn't take me all day. I created the social media, so it's always in my day now. If I ever have, everyone's like, slow down a bit. If I ever find I've got time in my day, I'm like, ooh, what about this business or opportunity, or how do we do that? And I think there's no substitute for hard work, no substitute for putting the time in, waking up early, getting stuff moving. I create the restaurant, so it becomes a central hub for me, somewhere I can go every day and work, creative output, start thinking about food and start getting people eating my food on a daily basis.
What I find very interesting, even fascinating about your story, is that you became successful and you end up achieving your dream, which was opening a restaurant, not following a specific roadmap or strategy. You knew where you wanted to be, what you wanted to achieve. You just didn't know how to get there. Yet you were working incredibly hard. I'll take this job and I want to learn and I want to, go here and there and keep learning and keep acquiring professional experiences. And then at some point, that led you to you opening your restaurant, which was the initial intent after 4 years.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because other entrepreneurs in the same sector, but also in different sectors, they usually follow a very specific roadmap or strategy, and that has advantages and disadvantages. A disadvantage is that when they deviate slightly from that strategy, which in my opinion is absolutely normal because life cannot be very much predictable, especially 4 years down the line, they tend to panic like, oh, I'm on the wrong path. I'm not going to achieve my dream. But yet you didn't have this perhaps pressure on you, and you were just downloading information, learning, perfecting your craft, and in the right place, the right time, the right moment, you opened what right now is a successful restaurant.
Yeah, I think it's totally that. I knew when I got into the industry, I was like, okay, I definitely want to open a restaurant, so I've got to learn from people to do that. I was like, I want to write a book, because I'm looking at successful chefs and thinking, who's success? Who do I look at, like Gordon and Hugh Fernley, Whittingstall, Jamie Oliver, all those chefs who were sort of on the TV.
And which steps did they take to become successful? The
Yeah,
book
well,
and-
what are they doing now? What's so special about what they're doing? And then you understand like the personality, the presence on TV, which was at the time the biggest thing for the chefs, to then go and get a book. So I've then so I've got the restaurant. I've built up a good following. The restaurant's fully booked. It's about discipline. Essentially I've got a successful business, but then the pressure is then on because you've got a success. You're successful. So then what's going to keep you motivated to keep going and not just sit back, rest on your laurels? So obviously I keep driving forward. I did this butter series online just before we opened the restaurant, which was super viral, which probably gave me the biggest boost in my social media career to this point. It was like billions of views on between Instagram and TikTok, and it was going completely bananas. Like TikTok grew 1.5 million followers in 2 weeks. Instagram grew
Jesus.
800,000 in a week, let's say.
Would you say you were lucky?
I hit I think when I was creating. No, it's not luck, because it's when I was creating content for. I don't really believe in luck. I think you create your own luck by the experience you have. I don't believe that you can just be lucky. Like I don't think. Yeah, maybe you get lucky if you just in certain situations. The chap in 11A on the India flight the other day, that was luck. But I was very diligent in terms, when I was creating content, I was thinking, what do people want to eat? What do they want to see? Because obviously they can't eat the food, they're just looking at it. But I was thinking about, what do people have an emotional attachment with in food? And I was like, bread and butter is like the start of every meal in France, for instance. And a lot in a big part of the world, you go to a restaurant, you eat bread and butter. So I was like, and I was thinking back in my first restaurant, we used to do 3 different types of bread and 3 different butters, and people used to love it. So I was like, I'm going to do flavored butters with different, and use them in different things. I did one on TikTok, and it did 1 million views at the time. And then I was like, okay. 6 months later, I did another one, another butter. Another 1 million views. I was like, God, TikTok loves butter. So I was like, right, I'm going to do a series, butter series. So I did this thing where I was like, welcome to all things butter. In this series, I'm going to make all things butter. And it just went boom. It was like, and I was like, now it was like feeding the beast. I was like, I can't make the videos fast enough for them to consume. Fast forward 2 years, my business partner, who I went to school with when I was 13. He comes from a family of entrepreneurs and businessmen. He was the CMO of Trip, which is the fastest growing drinks brand in the UK.
I've interviewed one of the founders. Great company.
Yeah, so he was the CMO, and he was like, right. But I was like, how do we turn butter into a business? He said, okay, let me think about it. He said, right, we're gonna have to go and make butter. So he said, okay, Tom, I will set up the business and run it. You just don't get cancelled. So anyway, so he left his job at Trip. We go and do this whole, research and find the farm who are going to make the butters. So it's going to be a salted, unsalted, and then all the flavors that we do. So anyway, we go and raise some money, create this brand. We're lucky that I have this is where the following becomes a big thing. It's big leverage to get into these supermarkets and online stores and everything. So now fast forward, we've been running for 1.5 years. Yeah, just over 1.5 years. We did 1 million blocks of butter in our first year. We'll probably do 4 million blocks this year. So it's that I cannot attribute to my own that's not on me. But Toby is a fantastic, fantastic CEO, runs the team very well, built a really amazing team. So that's a credit to them. But what we have done is build a brand that represented what I was doing online. So, making the flavors, doing the, good branding and solid delivery of product, which I suppose comes from the hospitality sector, always delivering what someone really wants. So we kind of disrupted the bus market a little bit. It hadn't been, if you looked at different, that's where like branding, I love being able to create a brand because I love the whole
creativity,
visualization of what something can be and seeing it from the infancy to actually on shelf and on product. And I'm very lucky to be able to do that. I love the visual aspect and working with creatives, working with great branding agencies. So at the moment I use a company called Regular Practice, run by a guy called Tom Finn, who's really fantastic. But I think you can get, initially when I did the branding for Strakers, I had no money. And I kind of got, it's something I didn't know anything about. And when I was starting doing the brand, I was speaking to another friend of mine from school. And we created a brand. This is back in 2018. Sorry, I'm jumping around a bit. But we created a brand which I didn't ever end up using. And it cost me 27 grand.
But you learned from that?
I learned from that. And then when I actually I didn't use the brand because I changed the name to Strakers. And then when I built the Strakers brand, I was like, I cannot waste 27 grand again. I was like, I'm going to go. I found a student in Loughborough University who I paid 5k to do the logo and the website and everything like that. So I managed to I did learn. I lost money, but I learned, and I've become very strategic in how I allocate money for branding. So when I found someone who I really, really gelled with and worked with, he does everything for me now. But I know I can say, look, that's too expensive. You need to knock it down. So I suppose, in business, you become wiser with the mistakes that you make.
I agree.
Because you don't want to make the same mistakes again.
Butter business, restaurant in London, but also you have a restaurant in New York.
Yeah, not yet, but I've signed the lease. We're underway with all the planning and design and all fun stuff, frilly stuff like that. But we won't start building until September.
What are the main differences, in your opinion, between London's food scene and New York's?
I think New York, it's people eat out every night basically in Manhattan. So I do think there's a lot of similarities. I think both cities are pumping out some of the best food in the world. I think it's a restaurant at the end of the day. They're pretty similar in terms of how people experience the product is, for me, my product is going to be very similar to what I put out here.
Which one do you think is better from a restaurateur business perspective, London or New York?
Oh, I don't know yet. I can't.
Were you advised by anyone if that's a better market, smaller market, harder?
I think America is a bigger. I know America is a far bigger market, and for me, it's about getting into the American market. I've got a huge amount of following in the US. I've also got a US passport, so I was keen to go and explore. And I think if I can make it in the US, the growth is it can be just far bigger and far quicker. Because obviously I'm not here to, I'm not going to be young and energetic forever. I do want to be successful, and and that is quantified, as we were talking about earlier. Some part of that is to make money. I want to make money out of my businesses. I'm not running it for a vanity project. As I said, I've got 3 kids. I want to put them through school and give them a nice life. And so it's that, essentially a lot of work. I work to live still work to live. But I would like to expand and to keep the integrity of the brand, and also take, for me to take the restaurant out there also gives me the opportunity to take the butter out to the US, and build the business international, worldwide. That's ultimately what we want to do.
What would you advise to an aspiring chef that just wants to start his or her first restaurant?
So someone who's worked in the industry for a while.
Perhaps, yeah.
I'd probably, the best bit of advice would be to find someone who shares your same goals, but maybe has a different viewpoint on the industry, whether it's in the operations department, or let's say you're a chef, find someone who works in the front of house, or find a partner who knows how to put together the financial package. And so now for me with opening new restaurants, I have a very clear role, which is I work solely creative at the moment. I'll find the sites, I'll do the creative, the drive, and then Toby who's the CEO of the Butter, looks at all the operations, and Gavin, who works for me in the Butter, is the CFO, so he'll look after. He'll put together all the financial planning. If I find I want that site and I want to hire this many people, he'll do he'll just find people who have different strengths to you. Mm-hmm. That's the best thing you can do in business, is like stay in your lane and understand. I'm really, 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 really good at cooking, and I'm also creative, and I understand touch and feel, and so I'm going to stay in that lane. And then once you grow more than one restaurant, you can't be in more than one at one time. So having 3 people who you can rely on to communicate with, to send the clear message down to the rest of the team that you are across everything, is incredibly important.
I was discussing very recently with some friends what makes a restaurant successful these days, and it's interesting to see what my friends, from a consumer perspective, they think. They say that for them, restaurants are transitioning from selling good food and delivering a great service to becoming marketing platform engines. You need to be very good online, and that's probably your priority number 1, and everything else comes afterwards. What do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think if you deliver a shit experience, but you have a good online presence, it doesn't work. You need to have great experience as backed up with good online presence now. But I also don't think it's the major. I also think you can build a great restaurant without online presence. Like lots of the restaurants I go to, I don't even follow them on Instagram.
Are they successful?
Yeah. Some top hundreds in the world, and if I keep going back to somewhere, have a great experience, then I'm always going to keep going back there, regardless if I try and spend not so much time on my phone on social media anyway. I think you've got to, if you have a good experience, the word of mouth is more powerful than Instagram, because you never know if you're doing a video on Instagram, if it's targeting people in Asia or Australia, or that you never know where your audience is. You can't fire it to 10 million people in London. Mm-hmm. But what you can do is every day, if you have 100 people in the restaurant, make it the best meal they've ever had. They're going to tell their 10 friends. Then you've got 1,000 people who are in the city who are coming to the restaurant or trying to book. So I think it's experience first over everything. Then, yeah, great social performance. But really, the guests first, and create that energy. Make sure you're thinking about what people want to eat. Style of service. So I'm more laid back in my approach to the dining scene. I want food to give us the opportunity to converse better in our conversation, not to be like, oh, what's that? Oh, wow, I wonder how you did that crackly thing that's going on in the foam. And, whoa, God, isn't that impressive? I'd much rather the food be like, simple grilled bit of chicken, some lovely endive or something, buttered beans and lovely tomatoes and a lovely sauce, boom. and we can just carry on our conversation about whatever, you know.
A good friend of mine, he's the founder of a hospitality group called Big Mama.
Yeah.
And they just sold the business for just a bit over 230 million pounds. And I asked him this question, and he said, look, Alberto, you just need to open a very good restaurant. Now, what does that mean? He said, if your average spend per head is, let's say, like them, between 50 and 60 pounds spent per person, are you the very best restaurant within, 2 or 3 miles around you at that spend per head? If you are, it's going to be successful. Then you can sugarcoat it with a beautiful marketing and social media and the overall experience. But ultimately, are you delivering on the promise of value for money for the spend per head? I agree. Definitely it worked for them. But the problem that I face with generally consumer goods and services, and that includes the hospitality industry, is what is the definition of good, right? It's very subjective. A lot of people may dine in one restaurant and they may tell you, this is fantastic, this is great. But then the same person, or sorry, not the same person, but a different person may dine at your restaurant the night after, which is pretty much the same experience, and they may not like it. I've also went to restaurants on the same street in multiple cities in which one restaurant is packed and you dine there and the food is okay / mediocre. The music isn't great. The service is very rushed and it's quite expensive, but it's packed. And then you go to the restaurant next door, literally next door. And the music is amazing. The food is great. It's so much better value for money. They're so friendly and it's empty. And you wonder, why? Did you ever think about this?
I don't know if I've experienced that personally. I think if you've got quality, it shines through.
Have you not been to a restaurant that is great, that is not performing well?
Yeah, it depends, but it's not necessarily in the right location, potentially, whether it's design is wrong. I don't know. I've been to eat in restaurants where the food is really good, but the design and the feel is terrible.
Let's reverse it. Have you been to not great restaurants that are doing very well?
Not recently, maybe back in the day when I was younger and I was going to like a shit restaurant because I couldn't afford to go to a good one, but it was packed. I don't know what. I eat very sparingly out. I think the hard thing. I'll change the question a bit. For a successful restaurant, what is the longevity of a restaurant? That's something I'm starting to ask myself. And what is, how many restaurants are over 20 years old? How many restaurants are over 30 years old? How do you build a restaurant that lasts for over 30 years? That for me is what is kind of the way that I'm looking at it at the moment. It's in success in this moment, busy right now. Because I feel like you can create that in any way possible.
I have two answers for that.
Yeah, tell me. I'm flipping the interview.
The first one is related to the customer segments that you are tapping into. So let's give a simple example. If you're a restaurant in which your experience is predicated around a party, which there are many restaurants in, let's say, Mayfair or in Manhattan, that they are more of a party restaurant than a food and drinks restaurant, you're going to be probably very successful financially if you deliver the right party for a short amount of time, maybe tops 45 years maximum. The problem that you have with that in retaining those customers is that parties are trendy, right? They're about trends, and trends by definition, they evolve, they come and go. Then if you are a restaurant in which the main unique selling proposition is food and drinks, then you have two different types of restaurants. Just to simplify it, you have multiple, but let's say two. On one hand, one that is chef-based, in which the name of the chef, it is probably the main reason why people are visiting that restaurant. And just like the lifetime of a chef is very dynamic, that, in my opinion, would also be the lifetime of, or the performance of the restaurant is going to be very dynamic. You're going to have super high periods, super low periods, because that chef will not always be there, cannot always be there, especially if you want to scale, right? You preserve the name, but if you're not always there, perhaps you won't be able to maintain the level of quality of service if you're operating at that super high level standard. So I feel like that can trade very well, but the longevity of that, and again, delivering on the promise in which this is my restaurant, the name of the restaurant is my name, I can preserve this for 20 years when I am in New York and in Kuala Lumpur and anywhere else, I find it challenging for the consumer to buy into that. And then you have the ideal case scenario of restaurants that become institutions, a place in which perhaps you open it now, and when you enter, you feel like it's always been there. And there's a very interesting level of complexity, and I call it magic, that the interior designer first, initially, the interior designer needs to deliver in order for the customer experience to say, this has been here for 20 years, and maybe it opened last week. And then those institutions, they're not, again, predicated around delivering parties. They're not predicated around the name of a chef, because it doesn't matter. Like, let's say, Cipriani or Le Petit Maison. You don't really know who's the head chef or the executive chef. You don't care. Right? And ultimately, these types of restaurants, their cuisines are quite democratic. It could be Italian, it could be Southern French, or it could be even like, let's say, Japanese. You're targeting various different customer segments or different experiences that they won't evolve over time. For example, let's take a different industry, Instagram or TikTok, which you're very present on, right? Which is, I think, a super good marketing platform. I don't think Mark Zuckerberg right now can assure his shareholders that people are going to use Instagram in 10 years from now. I think not even him knows that. I don't know. I don't think he even knows that. But I can guarantee you right now that people are going to dine in an Italian restaurant in 10 years from now. Maybe not in a Latin American fusion with, some author, chef author experience, but definitely in an Italian restaurant. Maybe how they consume those products and their services is slightly different, but the baseline of the experience is going to be exactly the same. Can I invest into a brand that is as democratic from a culinary perspective, which is Italian or French or Japanese? And then on top of that, you have the different dining experiences. When people have less money to spend, let's say right now, post-COVID, you have interest rates, you have inflation. People, let's say, just to give a very random example, used to go out 20 times a month, just to give a very stupid example, when they had more disposable income. Right now, that gets chopped down to 10 times. When you were going out 20 times, probably 5 to 10 you were going to democratic places that your friends, your family, your work colleagues may like to. An Italian restaurant, a French restaurant, a Japanese restaurant. And then the other 10 times that you're going out, you may want to become adventurous. I'm going to try, going back to the Latin American fusion example. But if you're going now 10 times a month, right, you're chopping that down to half, which is normal because people are cutting down in their consumer expenditure, then you're going to be less adventurous. And if you still want to go out, as you mentioned earlier, I like to go out with friends, with family. Some people, they go out also on business lunches or dinners. You're going to risk less what your other people want to enjoy. And definitely, if you're taking somebody on a business lunch and you don't really know this person, the chances that they like an Italian restaurant versus a Latin American fusion, it's going to be very high. So I think the cuisine, if it's very democratic, the three ones that I mentioned, would help you with longevity. Not being a party restaurant will help you with longevity, and not being, and I'm sorry because I know that's where your style of dining falls into. If you're not only chef named, that can also help you with longevity.
Yeah. I also think just on Straker's, it's my surname, but it's not food by Thomas Straker. Straker's is a brand in itself, so I feel like I'm not conflicted by either of those points, which is why I think my concern was
Nobu has been very successful, and that's his name.
Exactly,
right?
yeah, but it's not. But it's not. But it's not. But it's not associated to him.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's you go. It's a chain.
It's what he represents.
It's exactly so. Whereas on the separate level, something like Restaurant Jean Robuchon was, it's his name, full name. Restaurant Gordon Ramsay, for instance, been there for 30 plus years. Gordon doesn't work there. Never will again, I don't think. But it's still got 3 Michelin stars.
Yeah.
And that's what I think a lot of people don't know that about Gordon. He's got a 3-star restaurant in London. That they think
Though I think opening a restaurant 20 years ago is different than opening a restaurant today.
100%. I mean, I can't comment because I didn't do it, but I think from what I hear from, industry professionals, yes, it is extremely difficult, extremely different.
There's another additional piece of information that I find interesting when making this decision, which is access to capital. What I'm finding these days is that people are more hesitant, especially in the hospitality industry, in investing into a person, a chef, because if that chef is gone, their investment is very much impacted. But if they're investing into a format, into an institution that is automated and that can be replicated and scale on its own without the necessity of this very one person, by definition, these financial institutions, either VCs or private equities, they're risk adverse. They want to diversify risk as much as possible. And a person, one living, breathing person, is very risky. So that's something also additional to take into consideration.
Yeah.
Tom, we're going to talk about some personal topics. And I really want you to be as honest as you can be with me.
Yeah.
You were criticized by the media for not hiring mixed-race chefs from a post that you uploaded on Instagram. And these followed you for probably several months. How did that make you feel?
Well, where do I start with this? So it didn't follow me for several months. It followed me for a lot longer than that. But all I can say is we did learn. I learned a lot about social issues and that issues that people had with certain things at that time. Something that I may have not been aware of, or something that people found offensive. We had a diverse team anyway, but me putting up a picture of 8 white male chefs became a huge scandalous that I was a racist or whatever, which is categorically not true. And we had the fact is that those are the people who were on shift that day.
Yeah.
So I'm in a restaurant that works 7 days, seven lunches, 7 dinners. So 14 shifts a week. And each chef works 6 shifts. So you can work it out how many more chefs we had than those 8 people. But no, it affected me massively in terms of affected me financially, personally, because I had online, I had all these followers, and then I had lots of partnerships with brands, and they just disappeared. I was probably doing £500,000 a year just through partnerships on Instagram alone, and that went to 0 for the next year. So let's say, wrongly or rightly, I got criticized for this 8 white chefs incident. If I didn't have a thriving restaurant and my business was solely on social media, I would have been completely fucked, because I would have gone from making money to making no money.
Can I ask you went from $500,000 to how much?
0.
To 0.
0. I did not do a deal for 1 year, because it was all, because it was shrouded around that subject of really contentious subject of, not hiring, not having a diverse team. So, yes, it massively impacted me financially. Thank God, I'm a strong, resilient person, and I am. And I'd learn from mistakes. I try and educate myself to be better, and I don't let things affect me too, deep down too much. I'm not overly emotional. Some people would say I'm emotionally detached, but I'm not. I just, I can process something and understand like that. Okay, that was the situation. This is why people were upset. Let's learn from that. Let's be better. Whether I thought right or wrong, whether I thought whether I thought it was unfair or not, I learned from it and I fucking pushed on. And now I do deals with brands again. But luckily the restaurant never suffered, because it never suffered. In fact, we were never busier. All was good, but it's a constant, constantly you're checking yourself if you make the right decision.
Yeah.
Do I need to hire another girl in the kitchen? Have I got enough? Have I got enough people of color working for me.
Yeah.
Have I got enough? The voice that was never in the back of my head before is, am I going to get criticized for this? And it's meant I've been a lot less open to talking to people about how I run my business, or, because I didn't do a podcast for a while. I didn't do an interview. I then did an interview with a chap called who works for the Evening Standard, David Ellis, who then it was on the premise of a butter exclusive, and he fucking crucified me about what I said, and I had my PR team with me. Dave was like, yeah, that went well. He just like took it upon himself to go and like run with this story, which was a year, 6 months on as a friendly interviewer. Like, it was unfair. And I actually thought it was pretty like, whatever. Anyway, so we moved on from that, but it's a constant, it's always there. You just like, whether rightly or wrong, you check yourself like, oh, is this fine? Is it fine? Double check, triple check, because I never got into, and that's why also I never got into this business to be like, I don't want to make that you open yourself up to criticism by having an online presence. If I had no online presence, no one would have given a fuck. No one would have cared. I see pictures of teams which are not diverse all the time. It's just the fact that I was an easy target. So
I think that social media has brought us many advantages, but also many disadvantages. And one of the disadvantages is precisely this one. People look at the post and they make up their own minds very quickly, and they don't know the context. And also they don't give you the chance for you to explain yourself. They make up their minds very, very quickly, and they take things at face value. And that's sad, because I think on social media, people forget that, in the case of yourself, of a celebrity chef, you're human, right? You are allowed to maybe explain yourself, but also you're allowed to make mistakes. I'm not saying that what you've done was a mistake, because I am unaware of the intrinsics of the topic, but I definitely can agree with you that a picture doesn't give you the full picture. But again, that's probably the downside or the negative side of social media in your particular case. But you know very well also what's the upside. So unfortunately,
you got to take the rough with the smooth sometimes.
Exactly.
And if it's, I'm fully aware of, I try and educate people through social media, not make them, I'm not trying to push any there's no ulterior motive other than I'm proud of my team, my achievements, the stuff I'm trying to do. That's, it's all comes from I invest my time in doing that, my time in doing the videos, this. Yes, I've taken some money off the table from brands, but I've never charged a
user to watch your
user
videos.
of my content a penny.
Yeah.
I'm doing it yes, because I'm building my brand, but I'm also offering a lot of time, a lot of energy into making content that then, I will continue to do it. I'll continue to do it. I don't know for how long, but I will continue to do it. And enjoy doing it, and I want to create. I spend my life trying to create good times for in my restaurants, online.
Yeah.
And so for that, I felt like a bit of a sting, that whole thing. But as I said, we move on, get over it, learn whatever lesson you need to learn. And I'm sure there's going to be something I put my foot out of line again in something. We'll deal with that when we come to it.
You're mostly known for being a social media celebrity first, and then as a successful restaurateur. Does that bother you?
Back in the, before I had a restaurant, it bothered me a lot. Because I was like, they're like TikTok chef, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, it actually doesn't matter. Like, how many of these people you can, it doesn't matter. Why does it? It doesn't matter at all. It's like, it gave me an opportunity to sign a book deal. It gave me an opportunity to do other things in my life, travel, everything. So yeah, who cares? Whatever people, it really doesn't matter.
If you could talk to your 18-year-old self, what would you tell him?
What now? I'd probably give like a clear path of, well, just be true to who you are. Take the opportunities when they come, and if it's the wrong opportunity, change it. You can always make mistakes, and just keep true to what you believe in. It's your values. Because ultimately, there's life outside of work as well.
What is your relationship with failure?
I just want to get back and try and do it again. That's my relationship with failure. Like, I can only associate that with, like sport or something. That, if I I loved playing cricket when I was young, and if I used to get out for 2 runs, I'd then be like, next time I want to get 100. I want to get 100. I want to bowl better. I want to do this. And that's always been my attitude towards business is like, if it didn't work today, I want to make it work better tomorrow. I want to get at it and give it my best shot. And that's always I don't dwell on failure. And I think it's always like, that's the past. Next, just like learn from it.
Have you ever considered quitting? Because as an entrepreneur, there are days in which everything, and I mean absolutely everything, goes wrong.
No, I mean, I'm not a quitter. I'm not a quitter. But, I've had a rough time the last 2 months with, I briefly mentioned it. We had a fire in the extract system in the restaurant 2.5 months ago. And it was all at a time when everything was sort of like piling. I'd just signed the lease in New York. I'd just opened Acre, which is another restaurant I've got just down the road from Straker's. I was just about to open Acre the day after the fire. So the fire happened, and then that almost completely wiped me out financially. We had a £550,000 bill to rebuild the restaurant and keep all the staff employed and do everything. So, at that stage, I was like, fuck, this whole dream I've built. Like, not yet, but they should. They will. If not, I'm going to sue them because they should. Apparently, it's quite an aggressive insurer, but I'm going to get after them because I had to fund it all myself to get it back open. And we opened again 2 weeks ago, and that's taken this. I was leveraged. I had money in New York, just opened Acre, which was 100 grand over budget. And I had all these staff to pay for at Straker, so I was like bleeding cash, and then pay for the rebuild. So it was like money was pouring out the door. Couldn't shut the floodgates fast enough. But now, when the insurance money comes in, normal order will be resumed, and we're back in the mix. So
what if it doesn't come in?
It will. Either one way or another. Like we're going to get the money back. But if not, then no, we will get the money back. We're fully covered with we are. But that's one thing I would say to business owners: make sure you check your insurance. Make sure you get a good insurance company a broker to get you the right policy. Because I don't understand how a small restaurant. We are a small restaurant essentially.
How many covers?
We have 40 seats, but we're turning over good money. And had money in the bank, and if you don't have money in the bank, let's say, and you didn't have any cash personally, if this happens, and the insurance company take their time, you get wiped out, see you later, dream gone. Just from one small fire in the extract system, dream over.
How did the fire start?
I assume like a flare up in the extract. I don't actually know. I'm not a forensic scientist, but
was it a full on fire
in the extract? Yeah, but it was the small extract, so it was like shooting up. It was like a flamethrower. Fine, the fire engine came within 4 minutes and put it out, and it was all good.
So a 4 minute fire costed you £500,000.
Well, yeah, if you add up 250 for the redevelopment of the new extract system, all the equipment that we had to get rid of.
Salaries,
everything, yeah.
How long were you closed for?
2 months, yeah. Yeah, so it's a serious thing, and being like on it with insurance is something that I couldn't recommend highly enough. So.
If you were not a chef, what would you do?
I think I'd probably have gone and got myself into the army. I think.
Wow.
I like being physically active and about and moving around. Yeah, I like being outside, and that's one thing I don't get to do as much working in London. Is being, I'm a country boy at heart, but I sacrifice that to do certain things that I love. And
Are you happy?
yeah, totally happy.
How do you define happiness?
Well, I enjoy I'm busy. I'm surrounded by some great people. I've got lovely kids, lovely family. And yeah, I'm lucky. I'm lucky. I'm blessed. I'm not lucky because I chose the right, you can't choose your family, but you can choose your friends, and you chose the right people to be around me, chose the right team. I'm blessed that, that we are all there on this journey together. And I've got opportunities, and it's all like life's about to get super busy, even more busy with the travel to New York and stuff like that. So I'm living my dream. It's maybe not the dream, but I'm living my dream, and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna keep pursuing it until I'm unlucky.
If this was the last interview you ever gave, what would your last words be?
Enjoy it. We're not here for long, so you got to give everything. Work hard, play hard. And if you can't play hard, if you can't work hard after you play hard, then you shouldn't play hard. You've always got to turn up. That's the thing. Always got to turn up.
Tom, thank you so much for coming. I think freedom is probably a key ingredient in everyone's happiness, in everyone's definition of happiness. And if I were to describe you in one word, it would be free. Yet, even though you work in the hospitality industry, a lot of people might think, well, he's not free. I would define you as free. And the reason why I would describe you in that way is because you have done for probably your entire life whatever you want, whenever you wanted. You've lived life according to your own terms. And that, on one hand, can be criticized by society and by culture because you're not following the norms. You're not following what people expect you to do. But then on the other hand, you are free as a bird, and you can dream, and you can do and undo. And I feel that that is probably a state of mind that a lot of people only dream of. So thank you very much for sharing your story. Thank you so much also for being so honest with me. And a lot of luck in the opening in New York. I'll definitely come and visit you both in New York and London.
Yeah, please do.
And thank you for this very refreshing conversation.
My pleasure.